They call it the Windy City, not because of its weather, but because of its politics, its corruption, and its noise. But beneath the noise, under the fog of ambition and greed, there was another sound, the echo of gunfire that built modern Chicago. A war most Americans have forgotten, but Chicago never did. The Mafia War of Chicago wasn't just a fight between gangsters. It was a collision of worlds, Sicilian tradition versus American capitalism, honor versus greed, old blood against new ambition. It began as a family feud and became a shadow war that reshaped the criminal map of the entire United States. It all started in the early 1910s, when the city was bursting with immigrants, Italians, Irish, Jews, all carving out their corners of the new American dream. But for the Italians from Sicily and Naples, opportunity came not through industry, but through power. And power came from control of protection rackets, bootlegging routes, and most importantly, respect. The first real power in Chicago's underworld wasn't Al Capone. It was James Big Jim Colosimo. He ran the city's vice operations, brothels, gambling, liquor, with charm and precision. Colosimo wore silk suits and diamonds, dined with politicians, and kept the police in his pocket. He believed crime could be civilized, but in a city hungry for anger, civility was weakness. When Colosimo refused to join the bootlegging trade during Prohibition, his young protege, Johnny Torrio, made a choice. In 1920, Colosimo was found dead in his own restaurant, a bullet through his head. The killer was never officially identified, but everyone in Chicago knew Torrio had cleared the path for something bigger. Torrio brought in a young enforcer from Brooklyn, Alphonse Capone. Together, they transformed crime into business. Torrio built alliances, Capone enforced them with bullets. But even empires have enemies. Across town, the Irish North Side Gang, led by Dion O'Banion, had their own claim to power. They controlled breweries and demanded their cut. O'Banion was smart, ruthless, and bold enough to sell bootleg liquor directly to Torrio and then tip off the police right before the delivery. Torrio was humiliated. In 1924, O'Banion was shot dead inside his flower shop, hands still touching a bouquet. That single act ignited what would become Chicago's forgotten Mafia War. For the next 6 years, the city turned into a battlefield. The North Side Gang retaliated, gunning down Torrio outside his home. Torrio survived, barely, and decided he'd had enough. He handed the reins to Capone, and that's when things truly exploded. Capone didn't fight wars, he ended them. But his method was brutal. Kill everyone who opposed him. Bombings, drive-bys, public executions all became part of daily life in Chicago. By 1929, the bloodshed reached its peak with the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre. 7 men from the North Side Gang were lined up against a wall and mown down by men dressed as police. That massacre shocked America. Newspapers screamed headlines of gangland terror. Politicians demanded action, but the truth is, they had all been complicit. Judges, cops, even mayors had taken bribes from Capone's men. Chicago wasn't just infected with crime, it was built on it. After the massacre, Capone's empire began to crack. The government couldn't get him for murder, but they found another weapon: tax evasion. When Capone went to prison in 1931, it wasn't a victory for law enforcement. It was a reset button. Because behind him stood a new generation, quieter, smarter, and far more dangerous. Frank Nitti, Paul Ricca, Tony Accardo, they learned from Capone's mistakes. They realized the mafia didn't need guns to rule. It needed business fronts, political connections, and silence. They expanded into labor unions, construction, and Hollywood investments. Chicago became the financial heart of organized crime in America, and the lessons of that forgotten war became the blueprint for the modern mob. What most people don't realize is that the Mafia War of Chicago never truly ended. It simply evolved. The bullets stopped, but the corruption didn't. In the 1950s, when the Kefauver hearings tried to expose organized crime, Chicago's mob, now known as the Outfit, was barely mentioned, not because they weren't powerful, but because they were too embedded to touch. Their reach extended into Las Vegas casinos, into Teamsters pension funds, into the very fabric of American politics. The Outfit wasn't just a crime syndicate anymore. It was a shadow government. And even today, remnants of that structure remain. Real estate firms, private security companies, and even political lobbying groups, many trace their origins to men who once served under Capone or Ricca. The old code of silence, omerta, may have faded, but its echo still lingers in Chicago's DNA. When you walk through the streets of Little Italy, you can feel it. The restaurants once used for sit-downs, the warehouses that hid bootleg liquor, the alleys that saw blood spill for control of a city. It's not just history, it's inheritance. The forgotten Mafia War of Chicago wasn't forgotten by accident. It was buried intentionally because it reveals too much about how America works. It shows that power never dies, it just changes clothes. So the next time someone tells you Chicago's gangster era ended with Capone, remember this: Capone was just the face. The real mob never left. It adapted. It traded Tommy guns for briefcases and blood oaths for contracts. Because in Chicago, the mafia didn't lose the war. It simply learned how to win without firing a shot. And as long as there's power to grab, money to move, and secrets to keep, the Windy City will always whisper with its past.